Thank you once again, Alec Tapa, for that very warm and heartfelt greeting and welcome not only to the Japanese community, geothermal community, but also to the New Zealanders who are not from the Rotorua area to the region. For those people who have not yet deciphered the headpiece, Japanese translation is on channel 2 of the headpiece, and the English translation is on channel 1. My name is Greg Bignall. I'm head of department at Geothermal Sciences at Wairakei GNS Science, and it's my pleasure to again welcome everybody to this meeting. This is the second meeting that we've held as part of a New Zealand-Japan geothermal relationship that we hope will give opportunity for business, researchers, local governments to share experiences, build collaborations, develop other opportunities that might exist in New Zealand, in Japan, and around the world to everyone's mutual benefit. The way that we will structure today, there will be a number of invited talks, alternating between New Zealand and Japanese speakers. I will introduce the New Zealand speakers, and Otomaru-san from JOGMEC will introduce the Japanese speakers next couple of days. I will briefly start by giving an overview of the geothermal scene in New Zealand. So this is very much targeted towards the Japanese visitors to give some impression of how this meeting comes together and how the various speakers meld their messages for the community. There's been a lot of change in the New Zealand scene over the last geothermal scene over the last 20 years. The present state is that New Zealand generates about 1,000 megawatts of electricity from its geothermal resources. So that represents 17–18% of the country's electricity needs. Most of that electricity is generated in the central North Island, but there is also some power that's generated in the very north of the North Island at Ngāwha. Most of New Zealand's high-temperature geothermal systems have been explored, drilled, and developed to some degree. But in recent times, we've also looked increasingly at other geothermal systems that were less attractive in the past because they were lower temperature, or they had some other challenges for development, or sit within urban areas such as Rotorua here, where we are located today, or have particular spectacular geothermal features that are too valuable to risk being harmed by development. And this is the starting place, I think, for the topics, for the conversations that we'll be having today, looking how we can meld development, which has value from an industry and energy security for the country perspective, with lower temperature resources that may sit in rural areas with smaller communities, smaller companies that are interested in those resources that may be used only for direct use, that will have some value to local communities, and how we can meld understanding the geothermal system with a potential application and managing potential effects that might be result from development on those geothermal resources. During today, learning about some of the lessons, learning about some of the mistakes of the past, learning about the tools and techniques that we have today so that we don't make mistakes in the future. Fortunately, in New Zealand at the moment, we have an excess of electricity. So although the contribution from geothermal has increased over time to mitigate for a reduction in the dependence on fossil fueled plants, we come to a point where we have an excess of electricity at the moment. But as a researcher and as an industry, we cannot sit back and rest on that situation. We have to keep on looking forward. We have to be looking forward from an electricity perspective for developing our deeper and hotter geothermal systems, but also understanding what potential we have for our lower temperature geothermal systems and how they can be used for the benefit of the country, but also the benefit of local communities. In recent years, we've seen a large number of very sophisticated geothermal plants come online, plants that have utilized different technologies and different development strategies that are appropriate for the different geothermal systems. From a resource perspective, our geothermal systems are different from north to south, from east to west. The character of our geothermal systems are different, and therefore we need to apply different exploration techniques, understanding, and also engineering solutions to best use those resources for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the communities. So a large number of power stations have been developed in New Zealand in recent years. Beyond that, New Zealand has looked at a wide variety of industrial scale applications. So as we start to think now beyond electricity, what potential applications might we have for our high temperature resources in the areas of material processing, such as Tenon for wood processing, pulp and paper at Kawerau, at Mokai for processing milk powder. So starting to think beyond just electricity as a potential use of our geothermal resources. Community. So starting to think also from a development perspective, but also from a Maori iwi perspective. Maori who are intimately connected to the land and to geothermal and the hot springs are increasingly an important, necessary part of the development in New Zealand. So from a New Zealand perspective, just as in Japan, developers working with indigenous peoples, working with local communities, finding solutions for problems, identifying opportunities together so that opportunities can arise. It could be in a tourism space, such as here at Te Puia and Rotorua. It could be power. It could be direct use applications. So from the New Zealand perspective to the Japanese, thinking outside the box, thinking about other potential applications. And in New Zealand, I think we do a great job of sharing that information and telling people about what might be possible. Going on the road, telling people, visiting people, and talking about geothermal prospects and identifying for them, who may not be technically aware, what might be possible. And getting people enthusiastic about geothermal. Finding that balance between a geothermal system that may not have any surface expression, from a scientific perspective, characterizing that resource, exploring the resource, using that resource for some application. It may be growing flowers, it may be producing power, it may be a combination of those things. Working with community in a cycle of development and support and engagement and community. From the science perspective, it's understanding the geothermal systems, understanding potential risks, potential problems, mitigating for those impacts, and working with aspiring groups so they can move forward with their developments with low risk. Moving from a conceptual understanding of how a geothermal system works to a development strategy that is right and works for that geothermal system and meets the aspirations of the groups that are planning to develop that resource. And that's what this figure represents. The range of science expertise that sits in New Zealand, expertise in the engineering drilling space, expertise in the modelling space, so that an understanding of the resource can be reached at a very early stage of development so that a successful project can move forward. A great advance on how things were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when a lot of information was learned and mistakes were made. These days, the message that we would be giving in New Zealand to Japanese groups who are interested in geothermal, learning about geothermal developments for the first time, somewhat wary about potential impacts on hot springs. There's a lot of very positive and informative data that exists these days that allow developments to move forward with a great deal of confidence and reduced risk. Researchers working with industry, working in New Zealand with iwi is incredibly important, and this is an area where the academic community in Japan can really engage with industry, problem solve, which is a part of the contributions that the research community in New Zealand make to industry. Industry are very equipped and very capable and experienced in developing geothermal systems, but sometimes will value the support that academia can make in terms of problem-solving scaling issues or corrosion or other aspects that might have in the past been a detrimental to development. Now allow projects to move ahead with much greater confidence. There's a lot of other very positive things that have come out of New Zealand in the last few years. Work that's been undertaken around health and safety, successfully drilling, safely drilling, developing the geothermal systems, building the plants in a safe and efficient, sustainable way is a big part of the operational works that are undertaken here in New Zealand, and opportunities where New Zealand can also share experiences with Japan as they move forward in the future. Strategies around using direct heat, strategies around the code of practice for safe drilling. A number of companies are becoming interested in Japan in drilling geothermal, but being able to talk to the people who've done it, people like MP Century, people who've written the books on how to drill safe geothermal holes. That expertise sits here in New Zealand and is available to support developments in Japan. And finally, I'd just like to introduce the training that New Zealand offers. The Geothermal Institute at the University of Auckland is famous around the world, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a graduate of the geothermal industry, and so is Goto-san from Japan. So the Geothermal Institute spreads and touches the worldwide geothermal community. Auckland University, GNS, other universities in New Zealand, industry here in New Zealand provides opportunities for internships and training that gives opportunities for young, up-and-coming, enthusiastic engineers and earth scientists in Japan to learn about New Zealand, learn about some of the experiences, and then be able to apply them in Japan. So that's my introduction to the New Zealand scene. What we will do during the rest of the day is have a number of speakers, and at the end of each presentation there will be an opportunity for. So So once again, it's just for me to say thank you and welcome to New Zealand. We look forward to the day. Welcome to, thank you to Alec and the welcome we received this morning. Thank you.